for, where's my little button?
That's right. That's
For coming in. So Roger, we have, you have 10 minutes for a submission, and if you want councillors to ask questions, then you need to manage that within the 10 minutes. And it's really helpful if you tell councillors who you are and
First person.
and what you do in Hawke's Bay. It's quite useful.
Okay.
Thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Roger Muir. I'm supposed to be retired, but I'm a part-time computer programmer who works from home. I live about 30 k's out west, where the weather's a bit different from here. And yeah, I've been in Hawke's Bay since 2003. I'll start off by saying that I'm in favour of keeping the port wholly owned and keeping its activities in-house. I believe the port and the regional council can find ways of financing port growth that are focused on the wider reality than just a balance sheet. Rather than go over ground which I'm sure other speakers are going to speak to, and probably to much better effect than me, I just would like to say a few words about the council's position on risk as it's been in the publicity material, and where it sees its risk in investing fully in the expansion of the port facilities. The council uses the all eggs in one basket analogy, and while this may be true for someone or a business investing in the share market, I think this is just a little bit misleading in the case of the council and the port. The council's not really a true private or public business entity, but in my view, it's a body designated to provide governance on social matters concerning the local region. Business is only one aspect of that, and there are numerous other parts to the region's social well-being. Finding a diversity of entities to invest in the region and for the benefit of the whole region is actually quite a difficult task because it's not a huge region. The port is one of those entities, and it has close ties to many other regional entities which together probably make up a large portion of Hawke's Bay's economic and social well-being. I see this as being the region's prime basket. So, in a real sense, all our eggs are already in this one basket. We live in an area of high seismic activities, and should we get a big shake, it's not just going to be the port that's affected. So that is part of the risk, but I mean, everybody's going to be affected. The infrastructure that enables the region to perform its daily business activities will all be compromised. Road and rail transport would almost certainly take a hit, and we're not overly endowed in options there. Investing in anything in the region is a risk, but it doesn't have to stop us investing fully in critical parts of the equation, such as the port. I believe that our constrained transport situation makes the port even more important in the scheme of things. In fact, I think it's pretty much the only game in town for moving many of the items that the region deals in, and is probably one of the most important prime movers. A lot of these items are not just short-term in nature either, and I believe they should be looked at as a long-term investment. In this situation, it seems to me to be more risky not to invest fully in the port in the longer term. While some of us have recognised the need for capital improvements to the port for quite a while, the current situation which we have here, to me, has all the appearance of a bit of a rush job suddenly thrust into the public arena. I think the process runs a high risk of people making snap decisions before all the reality is fully assessed. It would appear that the council wants to spread the investment risk just in case some of the investment plan turns out to have fishhooks and ends up costing more than estimated, or perhaps might even prove unworkable. I wouldn't like to think how often we see this happen with snap decisions. I believe the council and the port, together with considered advice from not just accountants, can find a way to fully finance and promote port growth in-house, keeping all the results to the benefit of the whole region. The highest risk to me, to the region, is giving part of it away. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger.
Questions?
Yes, questions from councillors.
Sorry?
Paul?
That's right. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Roger. You right at the very end, you said the highest risk you thought to the council was to be selling part of the port. What do you mean that's the highest risk? What do you mean by that?
Sorry, say that again?
Well, you said right at the very end of your presentation that the highest risk to the council is giving away part of the port.
Yep.
Can you explain why you think that's the highest risk?
Because every time we see some large organisation such as a port or an airline or anything like that get invested in by the private sector, control is either diminished or disappears into the private sector. And it also tends to disappear away from the region. And I think Hawke's Bay needs all its eggs in one basket. So that, to me, as I said, the highest risk is losing control over that, over the port entity.
Paul?
Thank you, Chair. I see from your submission that you have you prefer option A.
Yes.
Which is to obviously raise a loan and to be repaid from rates by the ratepayer.
Yes.
What do you think we should be telling the ratepayers who continue to tell us that they're struggling to meet any further increase in rates?
Yeah. I took that option because there was no other option for wholly owning the port. I believe that there are probably methods available, and I'm no expert, so I can't quote anything in detail, but I believe there's other ways of raising capital that doesn't necessarily rely fully on ratepayers.
Such as?
Well, as I say, I'm no expert, but I'm sure there are, other ways of finding finance for things like this.
Any other more questions? Peter?
What do you think of the notion of issuing shares to ratepayers and the shares being paid through your rates?
It's probably a very good idea in the short term, but my experience is that, say, somebody buys shares at $2 or something like that, and that's fine for a couple of years, and then some larger entity comes along and offers everybody $2.50 for their shares. Most of the ratepayers are going to sell their shares at that stage to recognise a profit. And there's, as far as I know, there's no control over where those shares are going to go after the initial sale.
But what if there was preemptive rights?
Pass, I don't know enough about that.
Oh,
But
I mean an automatic buyback that you could only sell back to the company.
that would quite possibly work, in my view. I think finding some method of keeping it in-house in the region, and it has to be within the region. If it goes outside, we lose control and other interests may take over.
Thank you very much, Roger. Really appreciate it. So Valerie's not here. Is Clarence here? Clarence, thank you very much, Clarence. A bit early, but are you happy to come a bit earlier outside your time?
I'm all set.
So, Clarence, you probably heard what I said to Roger. You've got 10 minutes, which includes questions from councillors, so you've got to manage your own space there. And it is quite useful if you tell councillors who you are and how you fit into the scheme of things in Hawke's Bay.
Right. My wife and I moved to Hawke's Bay from Portland, Oregon in 1986, lived here ever since, and became citizens in '89. And prior to coming to New Zealand, I was president and CEO of a telecommunications company. I was vice president of engineering of a robotics company, and I was product development manager of a laser systems company. I have a master's degree in management from MIT Sloan School, who is consistently rated in the top 5 schools in the world and currently rated #1 by the Times Higher Education World University. I have a handout with all this information if you want to look at it after the fact. Sloan's curriculum is aimed for developing executive and senior managers, both in the private sector and in the public sector. And my area of expertise at Sloan School was in strategic planning. And from my standpoint, the port exists primarily to provide crucial services to Hawke's Bay. And I think it's a mistake to think of the port as a business, just I think it's a mistake to think of the hospital, the DHB, as a business. They have accounting systems, they keep track of income and outgo, assets, liabilities. That doesn't necessarily make them a profit-oriented business. They don't have to turn a profit to justify their existence by the taxpayers. They provide a service to the region. And it doesn't have to turn a profit in and of itself, necessarily. You may have cast it in that role, but I think inherently it doesn't have to be there. I also think that the regional council doesn't exist for the purpose of providing investment opportunities to either ratepayers or to outside people. So I'd like to just talk about the logic a little bit in the pathway you're going, because I think that there are alternatives. One of the things that certainly is true is that you can't graduate from Sloan without having a comprehensive understanding of accounting. And while we were always taught about accounting, at every point along the way, we were taught, because we're talking about executive kind of people here, how accounting information can lead you down an erroneous path and can create what I would call misinformation, just the data itself. And I think that the debt equity ratio that's been talked about is exactly that kind of an erroneous interpretation or application of accounting data. I think that the regional council is a government agency, and the debt equity kind of ratio, things that apply to standard businesses, doesn't apply to the regional council. The regional council will not be allowed to file bankruptcy. It's a considerably lower risk option than just an equity issue or an investment in some other kind of company that's standalone. In my view, that if you have a business plan, a cash flow plan that is compelling enough to attract an outside investor, from an equity standpoint, it should be compelling enough to attract an outside investor from a bond standpoint. The cash flow for one can meet the cash flow of the other. And I think that the cash flow that you're talking about, must be talking about when you're talking about an investment float, an equity float, that cash flow has to be significant enough that the business plan attached to that would not result in rates increases. And if it doesn't do that, then you're not somehow giving the public investors the reality of what it would be. I mean, either it stands on its own from a cash flow basis, or it doesn't. And if it stands on its own from a cash flow basis, then a bond issue would be a viable option in my view. I think the proposed equity offer has too many flaws. I agree that if you look at the history of public floats of crucial parts of New Zealand, like the railroads or whatever, you'll find that investors tend to view those things as cash cows. They tend to put profits ahead of long-term commitments, and they'll want a part of the board for a 49% kind of an equity position. They want to be on the board. And I think that that puts pressure on the management then to provide the profits to keep the share price up and to service the people that are sitting on the board. And finally, I'd like to just say that if you sell 49% today, even if you go down the equity right, if you sell 49% today, you've got nothing to sell tomorrow without giving away the port. And the port currently belongs to the people. And I think that going down this pathway is not the only viable pathway, and I think it has long-term consequences that are undesirable. Thank you.
Thank you, Clarence. Questions?
What would, thank you for your presentation. What would your view be of a more hybrid, lower sell-down loan package?
Well, I think there are a number of things that were just said just in the past presentation, and that is that once you're in the public domain, then that's a game changer in my view, than being in a private, in a public service domain. And if you've gone down that logic, say 10%, okay, you can hardly argue with 10%, but that sets a stage then for going 20 and 30%. And I just see that the whole character of the organization changes when it's part of a publicly owned company.
Some people have argued that if it's public, there is more opportunity for scrutiny of what's going on, financial records, et cetera, compared to what our current situation is.
Well, if that's the case, somebody's not doing their job. Why is that public scrutiny not going on currently? The data should be there. The information should be there. I just am going to, my main argument is that I think that if you got a business plan that would convince an equity purchase, I think you should get, that business plan would support a bond purchase.
Clarence, I'm interested in your thoughts on diversification of risk.
I agree with the previous person. I think the port does not, the regional council does not exist for minimizing risk. It exists for serving the public of Hawke's Bay. And the port needs to be, if you're correct, needs to be expanded. That's something that you want to do on behalf of the public. I don't think you have risk, higher risk, lower risk is not an issue for this kind of an organization, a public sector organization. Debt equity ratio is not an issue to me.
Okay.
But I know that you've dismissed it, but the debt equity ratio is an issue for other authorities because councils have got themselves into significant trouble before by borrowing too much, leaving a huge debt to ratepayers.
That's a management issue in my view.
Was that a question?
That's a management issue in my view.
Well,
Not a structural issue, not a financing issue.
Question. Do you accept that if the council borrows money for the port, it constrains what it can borrow for other projects, that there's an opportunity cost to this?
If what you're suggesting in terms of the business plan that you're offering for equity shares generates sufficient cash to pay the profits that would attract those investors, it should generate sufficient cash that the ratepayer should not have to face anything.
That's not the answer to my question, with respect. My question was one of opportunity cost, which is an economics issue, not an accountancy issue. And the economics talks about opportunity. If you do one thing, you can't do another. So if the council borrows heavily to fund Wharf 6 for the port, it therefore reduces its opportunity to go and borrow for other projects.
Why does that? Why is that a case?
Because you can't borrow limitlessly.
Well, okay, but why is that a case? I mean, suppose if you've got cash flow that's funding the bond, and that's working and it's standing alone, what's the problem with borrowing for something else?
There's a debt equity ratio.
Debt equity ratio doesn't apply. It is not a kind of a thing that applies to this kind of an organization. It's public sector.
In your mind, but other minds it does.
Thank you very much, Clarence, for views up out. But that was it could have turned into a really good, vigorous debate, which I would have enjoyed.
Considered running for council, Clarence?
I'm retired. I'm 76 and I got cancer, so but not.
Oh,
Be
no.
welcome around here. Thank you.
Thank you,
All the best
Clarence.
with that, Clarence.
Thank you, Clarence.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, do we have Joseph Mackay or Roger here? Joseph Mackay? Roger? No, we don't. So, are you a submitter, sir? What's your name, sorry?
Staples.
Red Staples. Oh,
2:10,
210.
210.
Ooh, you might have been late.
2 o'clock, 2:10.
Fred, would you be happy to step in now since the other people aren't here? I'd really appreciate that.
Page 44.
Just circulate this round, pass it round, be enough, or?
So welcome, Fred, and thanks for stepping in a little bit earlier. So the rules are...
It means I don't get nervous for so long.
No, I hope you're not too nervous. It's,
You're a
I know
scary
they're a
man. You're a
fearsome-looking bunch, but they're actually quite not as fearsome.
Who's fierce?
I'll take you.
So, Fred, so you have 10 minutes, and if you want council to ask a question, you've got to do within that 10 minutes to be fair to everybody else, even though we seem to have a bit of luxury of time at the moment. And it's really good for councillors to understand who you are. So if you
Yep,
could
we'll
introduce
do that.
yourself, that would be really good. Thank you very much. Righto, you're on.
Okay, I've come here to submit that I strongly support the port's expansion. I strongly want the Hawke's Bay Regional Council to retain full ownership. So I believe if these recommendations are not followed, I believe the Port of Nature's future will be significantly diminished, and the people of Hawke's Bay have a greater cost to the Hawke's Bay cargo interests, the Hawke's Bay economy and Hawke's Bay's prosperity and future. Now then, why am I qualified to submit? I was for over 20 years the General Manager of Shipping at Panpac. In that time, I managed 2 charter ships directly for between here and Japan, and of course other services for the manufactured goods of shipping here, there, and everywhere. We developed markets in Japan, China, and Southeast Asia. In that role, I took over the stevedoring management company in Japan, and I also had many discussions and negotiations with people in China and the United States. I was also a co-founder of a shipping company to the United States, and again, I helped establish the ports we visited and the stevedores we used.
Fred, you came to the Flaxmere meeting, didn't you?
Yes.
I didn't recognise you without your tie. My apologies.
Oh, it's the right colour, isn't it? It's the Port of Nature colour. And so throughout, I was also additionally a member of the New Zealand Shippers Council. And the last 3 years I was there before I retired from that august company. I was the chairman. As such, throughout my whole time, I spent a huge amount of time championing basically the regional ports, especially Napier, because of I think the great misunderstanding of how the port system in New Zealand works and the shipping companies. However, I strongly advise you, from my experience and knowledge of all these matters, that you will have great difficulty getting a cargo interest that represents a regional port like myself, because I certainly found it quite lonely advocating these things, and that whenever you go out for basically consultation, the majority of people that you ask will be in support of hub ports. Practically all the major shippers and players north of Taupo support Tauranga as a hub port. And you should be aware of that when you're talking to these people and when they advise you. In fact, so for example, Fonterra and Silver Fern Farms have set up a new shipping logistics company, Kotahi. And in that, they've guaranteed a certain volume of containers to Tauranga and Timaru. Probably, I'd imagine, Silver Fern will be shipping meat from Hawke's Bay to meet those actual commitments. They've openly declared that they support a hub and support port system in New Zealand, which in effect, if that was to go ahead, would be the complete demise of Napier and would have a huge impact on the Hawke's Bay region. Now, then I know this because I was in the tent with all these people, so I do know what they think. So I'm in a unique position that you'll probably not be able to find anywhere else. I think with my background, I regard myself as one of New Zealand's experts from a cargo interest perspective with regard to the ports of New Zealand and the shipping. There's very few people have had my experience. Now, the problem is when people make these decisions on the hub ports, which has been going on for ad infinitum for 50 years probably or more, is that I believe they incorrectly analyse the situation of New Zealand. They're just applying general thoughts that occur around the world. What they don't take into account from the user's perspective is the total logistics chain. They normally only analyse from the port onwards. And in that respect, if there was to be a hub port in Tauranga, the cost to the Hawke's Bay shippers would be immense. It could, in some cases, double their freight rates to their markets. Now, what they don't take into account is that, in effect, the New Zealand system is quite different. And especially, they don't take into account Napier's special position. The shipping lanes of New Zealand basically travel up and down the east coast. That's one of the reasons why the port of Taranaki doesn't seem to go very far or Nelson, because they're too far off the shipping lanes. Now, for a port call to Napier, it takes 4 hours extra time for a ship to come off the line, berth, and then go from the berth back out to the shipping line. It's insignificant in the total scheme of things. And that means that calling in at Napier is not a significant issue from a shipper's point of view. However, as the ships continue to get bigger, then of course, as we know, the Port of Napier is now struggling to actually accommodate the ships and the trends of ships to larger ships. So that's why I strongly support the need for Napier to develop a deep water berth capable of taking Panamax vessels. At this stage, what they've proposed will not fully do that, but it will take up to 10,000 TEUs. In my mind, they should be actually making the wharf structure such that it could be dredged to a Panamax depth later on when it's required to about, say, 18 metres, which is the depth of the new Panama Canal, and what sets the vessel size. So I support a new, deeper wharf capable of handling vessels up to 10,000 TEUs. So I'm strongly of that opinion. I always have, and I believe that the port, in my mind, the port's been a bit slow on the matter. Should have happened years ago. Now then, with the choice of funding, I'm very, very strongly support option A of the port ownership continuing to be 100% owned by the Hawke's Bay Regional Council. I believe it's the only way for the Port of Napier, Hawke's Bay cargo and Hawke's Bay economy and people's long-term interests to be protected and preserved. All of the other 3 options do not achieve this and put at risk the Port of Napier in my mind. Some of the reasons for this conclusion: the port has a natural market power over the exporters. If an exporter from Hawke's Bay has to go to, say, Tauranga, because that's the most likely situation, and it's going to cost him at least $1,500 or something extra to take that actual container by road to Tauranga. And forget about coastal shipping. That's never been competitive and never will be. You can tell you that. I've had quite a lot of experience in that area and had a lot to do with the New Zealand Shippers Federation in my time. they're continually asking for cabotage to protect their situation to develop a local monopoly because they can't compete. That could be, in some cases, a near doubling of the cost of getting the cargo to overseas, probably 30 or 50% on average, which in many cases around Hawke's Bay could mean the end of some viable industries at the moment. I can't imagine the Apple people would be very happy of paying that sort of amount because they can't afford to pay huge wages for their workers, so I don't know how they're going to pay extra money for freight. So the port has a degree of market power at the moment that is not actually flexing to a large extent because it could increase the rates of freight by that differential to get to Tauranga. Under any shareholder model, I believe that would happen. So the advantage of having the Port of Napier would be lost to the Hawke's Bay exporters. Options B, C and D, I believe, would basically those owners or operators would be their job would be to maximise the return to the port, not the best return for Hawke's Bay. This is with containers. It's only possible ownership that can mitigate that is the full ownership by the Hawke's Bay Regional Council. I believe with any other shares holders, even with a minority stake, they would be able to exert this rent. The port company, when it was formed, was required to act commercially. The Commerce Commission, that some people think will protect us, you can forget about them. In a similar situation when market rent was being extracted by the electricity industry, the Commerce Commission did an inquiry. They ruled that since there was no collusion involved between the electricity companies, that these companies were right and proper to extract this market rent as they should be maximising their profit. The protection of the consumers doesn't seem to necessarily be anything to do with the Commerce Commission. They are basically a pack of lawyers that just apply the laws they run under.
Fred, I'm afraid we've gone over our
Have we?
10 minutes.
Right, I'll really hurry up
But
then.
I'm sure councillors are really keen to hear, and those who have missed the Flaxmere meeting, I think only Paul and I were there.
Yeah.
And
And
Tom.
Benton.
Yeah, mate.
and
Clinton.
Flaxmere?
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Getting old.
So thanks very much because you do have a huge wealth of knowledge on these issues, and I'm really pleased that you highlighted that transshipping issue. And I recall at Flaxmere you said to ship to Tauranga would be the same as shipping to Hong Kong, around about. So really appreciate it. Thank you very much for coming along again and for attending one of those public meetings.
Yep.
I'm sorry we don't have more time.
No,
Well, we do, but in fairness to all other people, I can't give it.
No, you've already got the written submission.
Yes, we got.
And this
the
is just
submission.
basically going over the
Yeah.
ground anyway, and a slightly more abbreviated format.
Thank you very much.
I thought it would be good for me to show you how committed and passionate I was about
You sure are.
subject.
Thank
And
you very
that comes from my long experience of fighting for the Port of Napier's survival over the years.
So I'm just thanks. Just to talk to councillors. So we've rung Valerie Howard and not had an answer. Joseph McKee we've rung, and same with Roger. We've rung them both and no answers to the telephone. They're not here. I don't think, are they?
Roger's here.
Oh, Roger's here. Oh, oh, well, you're on, mate. You're late. We're late with you. No, we're not.
No, we're not.
Well, but are you okay to come up now?
Well, yeah, I'm probably a bit off the wall.
We love off the wall, Roger. We love off the wall.
I don't think I'm down to the wall anyhow, Fran.
Come on, sit down there. We love off the wall.
Roger.
Yeah.
No, well, thank you for identifying yourself there. That's good.
Yeah.
We rung you and you weren't at home. That's right. You were here.
Oh, you probably rang my wife's phone, not mine. You know, she's actually absconded for now, so, you know.
So, Roger, thank you very much for coming. We have 10 minutes allocated for every submitter, and if you want time for council, you've got to be a bit shorter than that. And as I said, you would have heard me say, because you're sitting there, it's really good for councillors to know a little bit about you, especially if you're off the wall. That's even more interesting for us. So, the floor is yours.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'm just a tradesperson. Way back, the coinage, making coining dies and that sort of thing. A trade that's defunct now and gone by computers. So I was taught the old way of making coinage dies and medallions and jewels. So I'm a bit of a dinosaur in that regard, all right? But I've just been keeping an eye on all the articles coming through because I'm recent to Napier, up in Tauranga, and having lived there for a time, I thought to myself, what's happening in Tauranga, I don't particularly want it to happen here. To tell you the truth, the expansion's taking place there. It's okay for the greater good of people, but actually people close by, it's pretty hard going. The noise level is horrendous. And I lived on a boat in the marina there. And so for a while, before I bought the house, I put it on the market. So it was the amount of stuff coming from the, just black slime on the landing in my boat. You had to clean it every week because you'd have a layer of this black tar type from the burning the bunker oil that the boats use. And it really pollutes a big area. A lot of shipping coming in there. And the noise pollution and the traffic was just horrendous. The amount of trains coming across, they didn't have any, they all got level crossings. And the amount of, it'll energise all that. You're putting more ships in there, it'll energise the whole place a lot more. There'll be a lot more happening. And there'll be a lot more comings and goings from trucks and people living here. It'll be probably another 10,000 people it'll probably attract altogether with the expansions. And, I'm probably exaggerating, but there it could be, but with families included. So the infrastructure of Tauranga, of Napier, is so different. It's so vastly different. It has very small. I'm just worried about Napier because I love Napier, and I know that it's going to affect Napier. Not so good in my thinking. And little narrow roads here that get jammed up pretty quickly when there's any real activity going on. They don't cope. So I just wonder how it's all going to happen, how it's going to cope with little Tauranga. It's only I'm a Wellingtonian from way back, and I don't know, even on narrow streets there, this has got something else. It's a village. It's not really you call it a city. It has a village feel to it. I hate to lose that. You'd have to build car parks outside of Napier. You'd have to do all that sort of thing. There'd be a big change in your roading. You have to alter your roading system to accommodate it. And it's not really there's not much room to do that really. Put a tunnel through the hill, I don't know. But it's, so I just worry about that aspect to it. I liked what Dr. Travis Lever says. I like what he has to say about the port of Tauranga, about, don't get too big, don't do grandiose ideas. It's all going to, you put a lot of investment into things, and life's all about change. The future's very, who knows? Our trade system, the logging system's not going to be that, the amount of volume, it's going to be way down soon. Maybe 5 or 10 years' time, but it's going to go down. And, I just think, well, I'm sure that they're handling right now, I'm sure that they're getting their apples and stuff to the market. I'm sure they're able to do that, as it is now. Is that right?
Yes.
It is, yeah.
But
and
might not be right in 2 years.
Pardon?
But getting tougher.
Oh, it's getting tougher, is it? Okay. So, I mean, if you start, digging deeper holes there, you have to continually take it out again. It's going to cover up done. It's going to with the Tauranga had a big boat, 44-foot launch, and I ran aground a few times avoiding people. It's a very narrow harbour, and it has a very deep channel. They've dug a very deep channel, but it does silt up and move around. And there'll be a lot of effort in keeping that open. That open, whatever you do there, as far as digging a deeper channel. But I just have the, it looks good, but I hate to think as a ratepayer, suddenly I'm going to be lambasted with a huge expense they never thought about with the total infrastructure. I hope they factored all those things into it. The changes to the to Napier itself, Little Napier. Okay, I'll tell you what I was going to say.
Well, thank you, Roger. I have a first question. Do you still live on your boat?
No, I sold that. My wife she sort of wasn't very good on her feet. She was, she wasn't quite moving around quick enough for grabbing ropes and things, and things came out a bit unstuck at times. So it's not fair on her. So yeah.
So you now live in what you refer to as the village of Napier. Be careful. Alan was the mayor once. About his village. Right, questions?
Yeah, it's a lovely place, Tauranga. I've lived in Napier. I lived in big cities, and and I love Napier. It's just far better than Tauranga.
Okay, thank you for that. Wait. Peter Bevan's got a question, and then you did Peter.
Roger, the information here says that you chose option A, which is retain 100% ownership, but everything that you said pretty much sounded like you didn't want any development of the port.
You got it right. Almost.
So you're pretty much actually opposed to the development as opposed to...
I would say, yeah, I mean, Napier's a lovely place. I'd hate to see anything go wrong out there, that's all.
Nothing goes wrong at Napier.
Peter, did you?
No,
I didn't. Are there any other questions? Roger. Oh, thank you, Roger. I really enjoyed hearing your story moving here. So, and I'm sure councillors did too, in your point.
Yeah,
of
it's a
view.
lovely place, and I've done up my house, spent mega bucks, but it's all good.
Thank you very
Okay,
much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Just to check, Joseph McKee, is he? No. Phil Norman? No. Are you Phil Norman? No.
Sorry?
Is Dan McKnight out, is he?
He's going to be here quite a bit ahead of schedule.
No, Dan McKnight's rescheduled.
Oh, okay.
So, we have over the page, Rion, is it?
Rion? Rion?
Rion, Robin, John Thompson, or George Lyle? No, George is not here.
You're talking almost an hour ahead of your schedule there, Chair.
That's right, you have to 3
Yeah.
o'clock.
So
We
who are
are.
the gentlemen we do have? We have two gentlemen here.
Yeah, two gentlemen just walked in. Are you submitting? No?
No submitters.
Neither of you have submitted?
You are.
So what was your name, sorry?
Rion Wilder.
Oh, you're Rion. Oh, you are Rion.
Sorry.
Okay, Rion, if we could have you there. I'm sorry it's a bit early, mate, but...
Oh, no, that's all right. I just wanted to come in early and just have a look at some other people doing their little bit before I've leapt in.
Well, you missed because the other people aren't turning up.
Yeah.
So, Rion, so the rules of engagement are you have 10 minutes.
Yes.
And even though we have a bit of time, we have to be fair to everyone. We've only given people 10 minutes. So if you want questions from councillors, keep it within that 10 minutes.
Yep.
And it's really good for councillors to know who you are
Yep.
and what you do and where you fit in Hawke's Bay, just as a prelude. So
Okay.
they know who they're talking to.
Yep.
Thanks, Rion. The floor is yours.
Okay, thanks. Well, my name's Rion Wilder. I'm a corrections officer here at Hawke's Bay. I'm also a keen spear fisherman and fisherman who's actually only recently discovered the joys of Pāngia over the last 2 years. I know I missed the boat on that, but I spend a lot of time on the water, whether down at Pairere or up here over here. But was that enough of a bit of an intro?
Yeah, that is.
Is any? Do I need to hand around all this financial summary for
Yes,
teachers?
yes, if you've got something you want to hand around.
Just something off your.
I'll hand it out.
Sorry, it's just easier for.
You just carry on while they're getting that.
Oh, yep, sure. So, I actually don't object to the Napier Port expansion at all.
I think it's good for the community and it's good for the region. My main concern is its ability to be able to deliver a reasonable return to the community. And according to the financial report in 2017, the port had a net debt of 51.2 million in 2012, and by 2017 it increased to 83.3 million, and that's an increase of 32.1 million. In the same time frame, the revenue was 60.3 million in 2012 and rose to 86.7 in 2017, an increase of 26.4. I'm sure you guys are all familiar with these figures, but what it's showing is the increase in debt is outpacing the revenue by 5.7 million over that 5-year period. And net profit after tax was 11.1 million in 2012, increasing to 16.7 million in 2017, an increase of 5.6 million. In 2016 and 2015, the net debt was higher than the revenue. I do realise that there has been a lot of capital investment, 113 million from 2012 to 2017. This investment is required to maintain a safe and productive, efficient workplace and to replace dated equipment as required. The cost of doing business in this environment, which is capital hungry, is an accepted and planned for risk. My concern that is the port is already experiencing growth, increased total cargo, 100.4 million tonnes from 2012 to 2017. Why is the debt increasing? This would appear like we are going backwards. The objective of making a return to shareholders, it seems, is more important than reducing debt. Paying down the debt at an increased rate at the expense of the shareholder should, in my opinion, be a higher priority. It's the responsible thing to do for the long-term benefit of the ratepayers. We need to reduce this debt. It's a false economy to pay dividends at the expense of rising debt levels. The idea of selling shares in the port to fund its development seems a poor choice. The selling of assets to the public or overseas investors to clear the existing debt and to raise the capital needed to build the new wharf just appears wrong to me. Your role is to manage this asset for it to perform to the best of its abilities, to future-proof it and to allow it to self-fund its own growth. If a person buys a share now, say for $1, what will the value of that share be in 2022 when the new wharf is operational? Double? Triple? Someone is going to make a lot of money. It's a reward for their risk. However, I disagree that it's made at our expense. If the investment arms of ACC, KiwiSaver, a Māori corporation or corporations were the investors, I would absolutely have no problem with the sale of a valuable and finite Hawke's Bay infrastructure. It needs to remain in New Zealand hands. This needs to be a rule and part of the sale agreement. We cannot continue selling valuable land and assets to overseas investors if they're required. They buy a share, we spend all of that money completing the infrastructure upgrades to allow for growth. We are no better off now as our port ownership has been reduced, percentage of profit or profit take is reduced, the cost of doing business will arguably remain the same, and so our returns more than likely will remain the same. Has the Provincial Growth Fund been considered? As it appears that the port falls into 2 of the 3 tiers for this. Tier 1, the regional projects, and Tier 3, infrastructure. And next script from the website. We can fund projects that support job creation, including in key sectors and regions, and that power up prosperity and productivity in one or more regions. Our goal is to accelerate regional development, increase regional productivity, and contribute to more better paying jobs. Therefore, each project should help achieve the Project Growth Fund's objectives, creating jobs, leading to sustainable economic growth, increasing social inclusion and participation, enabling Māori to realise aspirations in all aspects of the economy, encouraging environmental sustainability and helping New Zealand meet climate change commitments alongside productive use of land, water and other resources, improving resilience, particularly of critical infrastructure and by diversifying our economy. We welcome applications for funding that fall into the three main areas or tiers: regionally focused projects, sector-based projects and infrastructure-based projects. And you can make an application, blah, blah, blah. So as you're aware, there is $3 billion available over 3 years. This would be the best solution to meet the required expansion of the port. And as a quick exercise, I worked out the cost per kilo from 2012 and then again in 2017. I took the total cargo volumes, I converted them to kilograms and then divided it by the revenue. In 2012, the cost per kilo is $61.52. In 2017, the cost per kilo is $54.78. So our profit margins have clearly gone down. I'm not sure what the decrease in cost has, or why this decrease in cost has occurred. In any other industry alone, inflation should have at least made that be a little higher than that. So this means that it's great news for our external stakeholders, such as the exporters and importers, and it's not so good for us as ratepayers. And thank you.
Thanks, Jan. Thanks for all the work you put into that. Questions from councillors?
Your figures surprise me. Surely if you've got this greater volume going through the fixed cost, you expect the unit cost to go down. Why is that a surprise?
Well, sorry, what were you meaning? The difference between the 2012 costs and the 27 costs?
Yeah.
Well, those are figures that are taken directly from that summary. So for me, I don't know of any other industry where the cost has actually gone down over the last 6 years. In almost every instance, fuel prices have gone up, inflations have gone up, wages have gone up, taxes have gone up, rates have gone up, yet this cost has managed to go down. In every other aspect, I would have imagined that it would have trended upwards.
But just what I'm asking you is that if the volume's gone up,
Yep.
and the fixed costs are relatively stay the same, you'd expect the unit cost proportionally to have gone down, wouldn't you?
I can see what you're saying, but what I'm seeing is that if the unit cost has gone down, clearly efficiencies have been made. I don't know the reasons for that. All I'm doing is just stating a fact as it is, and my point is that I guess where in any other industry has the cost gone down? Where, like the port clearly has gone down, the facts speak for themselves, but maybe we could do with a margin increase. I know that the efficiencies in transporting logs as a cost per kilo must be more efficient than boxes of fruit. I don't know what the exact figures and totals are, but all it is just a fact. And the fact is that those are the figures as I've interpreted them. And I only did it for those two, I could have done it for the whole lot. But I do understand that the transportation of logs has got to be a lot easier per weight than it is for, say, boxes or cartons of onions or boxes of apples.
Sure.
And I do understand that, and I appreciate that. But my surprise is that it just hasn't really stayed pace with inflation, or because there are a number of factors involved in the calculation of further back. But I'm not one of those guys. I'm only looking at the total summary.
Thank you, Rion. We're out of time now, but
Yep.
Thank you very much for your presentation.
I like your work.
Thank you.
I just want to go back and just make sure these people, so Valerie Howard hasn't turned up, Joseph McKee hasn't turned up, so Phil Norman, who's on at 2:30, no, let's come back to him.
Are you exhibiting increasing efficiency, Chair?
I'm just going over it and making sure we don't miss anyone who's a bit late.
Or here at a time ago, you're a very efficient Chair.
No.
Going this rate, we'll be starting on Monday.
Robin, John Thompson, or Robin Gwynn or John Thompson. Otherwise, we have a pause. Or Norman.
So, all right, cup of tea time.
Well, it's not quite a cup of tea. If we have a cup of tea, some of these people are going to turn up.
Should be dead.
And like I say, we're a long way in front.
Can I just ask a question of, I suppose, of James, Chair?
Yeah, sure.
Roger Eli, in his presentation, he was, spoke about discharges that have been discharged to air from the port of Tauranga, causing issues for his boat and his boat that he had in the marina, right? Do we have? Do you know if the port has resource consents for discharges to air from the ships that are berthed in the port, or?
I don't know off the top of my head, but what I do know is that there's a major reform happening internationally with shipping to remove sulphur from the bunker fuels used in shipping, and they're being phased out globally. And there is a significant additional cost coming on all exporters on that. That's happening like literally right now.
Okay.
So the traditional sulphur issues that have concerned people from ships' emissions will be a thing of the past in the not too distant future.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Our next submitter is due in half an hour. So how do you want to handle a half an hour?
Well, if there's room for posing questions
Yes,
to the staff.
I think there is.
there's-
So we have half an hour to do that.
I have that question then, Mr. Chair.
You certainly can.
Thank you.
I thought I was...
You're giving permission for that, right? Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just in regard to Mr. Wilder's submission and other comments around environmental effects of increased volumes and shipping through the port, I wonder whether we can have some degree of analysis of resource consents applying both generally to the port and particularly to Wharf 6 if it's to proceed, and other environmental mitigations that are now a requirement of port operation. It may be useful to have some sort of summary of the mitigations that the Council is insisting on as a part of its actual duties and or its duties as a shareholder in the major asset.
Yep, we can do that for the decision
That would be
making for
useful.
the 19th. Yep.
Any other questions? Whilst we're sitting this out, why don't you can grab a cup of tea? We have half an hour.
Slante.
Mr. Chair, there's potentially another question that arises, just to give the staff a bit more work to do because they're a bit short of work.
So are we adjourning for afternoon tea or not?
Schedule me for tomorrow. I'm fine at any time tomorrow if you've got gas.
What?
Sorry, I'm talking
It's on Thursday.
Oh, Thursday.
Yeah, so you can move me the time, that's fine.
Thursday.